I used to think that love could survive anything, that if you were loyal, patient, and kind, the universe would somehow reward you. For years, I lived by that belief, until one ordinary afternoon at the hospital changed everything. I remember holding a small box of homemade soup, his favorite. He'd said he wasn't feeling well, that he had a quick checkup. I left my work early, thinking a small surprise might brighten his day. The elevator doors opened, and a cold gust of antiseptic air brushed across my face. Each step down that hallway felt strangely heavy. My heels echoed against the floor, each click bouncing off the sterile walls like a countdown I didn't understand. Then I saw him, and in that instant, the world around me froze. He was standing by a window, his hand resting gently on the shoulder of another woman. She looked delicate, anxious, someone he wanted to protect. And next to them stood his mother, her expression soft and approving. For a second, my brain refused to accept what my eyes were seeing. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she was a family friend or someone who needed comfort. But then I saw the look in his eyes, tender, reassuring, familiar. The way he used to look at me when he thought I wasn't watching. That's when the truth slammed into me like a wave I couldn't escape. He wasn't comforting a stranger. He was holding his lover, the woman who carried the life he'd once promised I would give him. The box of soup slipped from my hand, shattering against the floor. The sound cut through the corridor like a gunshot. All three of them turned toward me. His mother's expression hardened first. She didn't even look surprised. "Why are you here?" she hissed, her tone sharp enough to draw blood. I couldn't answer. Words evaporated from my mouth. My husband, no, the man I thought was my husband, took a hesitant step forward. His lips parted, but nothing came out. And then she said it. The sentence that would echo inside me for months. "She's barren," his mother muttered, not whispering, not hiding, as if my pain were a public announcement. You can't blame him for wanting a family. For a moment, I didn't even react. My body refused to move. It felt like time had collapsed into a single point of silence, where every heartbeat sounded like an accusation. I had spent years trying to please that woman, learning her recipes, remembering her medicine, calling her every Sunday. And yet in one breath, she reduced me to nothing more than a word: barren. My husband tried to interrupt her, his voice breaking. "Mom, please!" But she waved him off as if my existence were an inconvenience to her narrative. Something inside me cracked. Not loud, not violent, but quietly, like a branch giving way under too much snow. I didn't scream, I didn't run. I simply turned and walked away. The nurse at the desk called after me, but I couldn't hear her. My vision blurred, my chest tightened, and all I could think was, this can't be real. I stepped outside into the harsh sunlight. The sky was painfully bright, mocking the darkness inside me. People passed by, talking, laughing, living, as if my world hadn't just collapsed. Grief isn't always loud. Sometimes it's quiet, a silence that sits on your shoulders and refuses to leave. That night, I sat in my car for hours, watching the city lights blur through my tears. I thought about every sacrifice I'd made for him, every late night waiting for his calls, every dream postponed, every prayer whispered in the dark. I remembered the first time he told me he loved me, the way he promised to protect me from pain, the way he swore his mother's approval didn't matter as long as we had each other. All lies. When the tears finally stopped, an eerie calm settled over me. Not forgiveness, not acceptance, just emptiness. I drove home, opened our photo album, and stared at our wedding picture. We looked happy, real. But now, even the smiles felt borrowed. In the mirror, I saw a woman I barely recognized, eyes swollen, heart hollow. I whispered to her, "You gave everything." And it still wasn't enough. The room felt heavy with unsaid words. I took off my wedding ring and placed it on the table. It rolled once, twice, then settled. A tiny, metallic period at the end of a sentence I never wanted to write. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Sometimes the people who claim to love you are the ones who quietly break you piece by piece. And sometimes walking away isn't weakness. It's the only act of strength you have left. I didn't sleep that night. The house was filled with shadows of conversations I'd never have again. By morning, I packed a small suitcase, not because I had a plan, but because staying meant dying a little more every day. As I locked the door behind me, my hands shook, but my heart whispered something I hadn't heard in years. You still have yourself. I didn't know where I was going. I only knew that I couldn't stay where I was broken. The road ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, uncertainty felt like freedom. Voiceover, soft, determined. They took my peace, my trust, my illusion of love. But they didn't take my strength. And that was the beginning of everything. The first morning after leaving him felt unreal. The city woke up like it always did. Cars honking, people rushing, life moving on. But I sat by a window in a small rented room, staring at a cup of untouched tea. Everything around me was the same world I'd always known. And yet, everything had changed. The pain didn't come in waves. It came in quiet moments, like when I reached for my phone, expecting his good morning text, or when I caught myself setting out 2 plates instead of 1. I thought heartbreak would feel like fire, but it felt more like drowning in silence. Days turned into weeks. I went to work, smiled at people, pretended everything was fine. But every night, when the world went quiet, I replayed that hospital scene in my mind over and over. His hand on her shoulder, his mother's cold eyes, that one cruel word, barren. There's something strange about humiliation. It doesn't fade, it grows roots inside you. I began to question everything, my worth, my identity, my purpose. Was I truly less of a woman because I couldn't give him a child? Had my value always been tied to something I couldn't control? I didn't have answers, only a hollow ache and 1,000 sleepless nights. One evening, my best friend Ria showed up at my door. She didn't ask questions. She didn't say, "I told you so." She just hugged me, long and tight, and for the first time in weeks, I cried without shame. Ria, gentle, off-screen. You don't have to prove your worth to people who can't see it. Those words stayed with me, but they didn't heal me overnight. Healing isn't a switch. It's a slow, messy process of breaking and rebuilding. I started journaling, writing every emotion, every memory, every fragment of anger that I had buried for years. It was like bleeding on paper, but it helped me breathe again. I began to see patterns I had ignored. The way his mother subtly made me feel small. The way he always chose silence over standing by me. The way I convinced myself that love meant patience, even when it hurt. That's when I realized I wasn't just heartbroken because he betrayed me. I was heartbroken because I had betrayed myself by staying quiet, by shrinking, by accepting less than I deserved. One afternoon, I went to visit my parents. My father looked at me with eyes full of worry, but my mother simply said, "Sometimes God breaks your heart to save your soul." I didn't understand it then, but that sentence would later define my transformation. A week later, I received a message from my husband. He wanted to talk. My hands trembled as I stared at the screen. For a second, my old self, the one desperate for closure, wanted to say yes. But then I remembered that hospital corridor, his mother's voice, and the way he had stood there, saying nothing while I shattered. So I didn't reply. For the first time, silence became my weapon, not my weakness. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped defending my pain to people who would never understand it. Instead, I began to listen, to the quiet, to my own voice, to the woman I had forgotten. I took long walks in the park, let the wind sting my face, and reminded myself that I was still alive. One day, as I watched children play nearby, a thought struck me. Maybe motherhood isn't just about giving birth. Maybe it's about nurturing life, hope, and kindness in yourself and in others. That night, I slept for the first time without tears. Pain changes you. It strips you down, burns you raw, but it also rebuilds you with a strength you never knew you had. In the mirror, my reflection still looked fragile, but my eyes had something they hadn't in months. A flicker of defiance. Slowly, I started volunteering at a local shelter, helping women who had nowhere to go. Listening to their stories made me realize how universal pain was and how powerful survival could be. Each woman I met had her own version of heartbreak, betrayal, loss, abuse, abandonment. But all of them shared one thing: resilience. Through their eyes, I began to see myself differently, not as a victim of betrayal, but as a survivor of it. I had lost my marriage, but I had found something far greater: the courage to start over. One evening, as I was leaving the shelter, I saw a couple walking hand in hand. They looked so much like how we once were, young, hopeful, naive. For a moment, I felt that old sting of sadness. But then quietly, I wished them well. Because I no longer wanted revenge. I wanted peace. That night, I lit a candle by my window and whispered, "Thank you for breaking me, because it taught me how to rebuild." I wasn't healed yet, but I was no longer broken either. I was in between, and that was enough. Voiceover, calm, reflective. Every ending begins as heartbreak, but sometimes endings are just disguised beginnings. As I looked out at the city lights, I knew the woman I used to be was gone, and though it hurt to admit it, I finally understood. Maybe she was never meant to survive this chapter. The next morning, I packed away our wedding photos, not out of anger, but because I was finally ready to make space for something new. I didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of it. Healing isn't something that happens overnight. It's like the sunrise. You barely notice it until one day you wake up and realize the darkness has begun to fade. Weeks turned into months, and I started rebuilding myself piece by piece. Some days I felt strong enough to smile. Other days, I still broke down without warning. But even on the bad days, I reminded myself, every tear was washing away a little more of who I no longer needed to be. I kept writing in my journal, letters to the woman I was before the betrayal, letters to the woman I wanted to become. Sometimes I even wrote to him, not to send, but to release the words that had poisoned me for so long. You took my trust and turned it into a weapon. You made me question my worth, but I refused to let that be my ending. Writing those words felt like pulling thorns from my chest, painful but freeing. I learned something beautiful during that time. Forgiveness isn't about saying what they did was okay. It's about saying, you no longer have power over me. I wasn't ready to forgive them yet, but I was ready to forgive myself for staying too long, for loving too hard, for breaking silently. One morning at the shelter, I met a young woman named Sana. She had a small baby wrapped in a thin blanket and eyes full of fear. Her story mirrored parts of mine: betrayal, rejection, loneliness. But when she smiled at her child, there was something unbreakable in her. Helping her reminded me of something I'd forgotten. I could still give love, even if mine had been betrayed. We started a small support group for women like us. No fancy banners, no funding, just a few broken souls who refused to stay silent. Every Saturday, we met in a tiny community hall. We shared stories, tears, laughter, and slowly, hope. Each story lit a small spark inside me. By giving others strength, I found my own. One day, Ria handed me a letter. She smiled shyly and said, "You don't have to open it if you're not ready." It was from him. My hands shook as I unfolded it. His handwriting was the same, neat, careful, familiar. The words blurred before I could finish the first line. He wrote about how things got complicated, how his mother pressured him, how he never meant to hurt me. But what caught me wasn't his excuses. It was his request. He wanted to meet, to make things right. For the first time, I didn't feel anger or longing. I felt clarity. I didn't want revenge. I didn't want closure from his lips, because the moment I left that house, I had already closed that chapter. Still, I agreed to meet him, not for him, but for me, to prove to myself that I could face the storm that once destroyed me. We met at a small cafe, the same one where he had proposed years ago. The irony wasn't lost on me. He looked older, maybe from guilt, maybe from time. When he saw me, he smiled nervously. I didn't smile back, husband, hesitant. "I'm sorry for everything." I nodded but said nothing. He went on about his mistakes, his regrets, his new responsibilities. I listened, not because I cared, but because I needed to hear my own silence, steady, unbroken. When he finally asked, "Can you ever forgive me?" I looked at him and said softly, "I already did. Just not for you, for me." His eyes widened, searching for the woman who once begged for his attention. But she was gone. I stood up, paid for my own coffee, and walked away. No tears, no turning back, only peace. Walking away that day didn't mean I stopped caring. It meant I finally started caring about myself. I didn't need him to see my worth anymore, because I saw it myself. That night, as I walked home, the city lights seemed brighter. The same streets that once felt like reminders of loss now felt like signs of survival. I stopped by a small flower shop and bought a single white lily. When the shopkeeper asked if it was a gift, I smiled and said, "Yes, for myself." That lily sat on my nightstand for weeks. It reminded me that beauty can bloom even after the harshest winter. I began taking small steps toward a new life. I started teaching workshops at the shelter on confidence, on healing, on finding purpose. I even began sketching again, something I had given up years ago. Every stroke of the pencil felt like reclaiming a piece of my lost soul. One evening, Ria said, "You've changed." I smiled and replied, "No, I've just come home to myself." Pain had been my greatest teacher. It stripped away everything false, every illusion, every weakness, every need for approval. And beneath it all, I found me. The woman who once begged for love now knew she was enough. The woman who once cried herself to sleep now helped others find their strength. If you asked me then whether I'd ever love again, I would have said no. Because love, to me, wasn't about another person anymore. It was about choosing myself every single day. For the first time in years, I felt truly alive. Not because someone loved me, but because I finally loved myself. And that was the beginning of my awakening. The storm had passed. But healing isn't about forgetting the rain. It's about learning to dance when it pours again. Months rolled into a quiet rhythm. Work, laughter with the women at the shelter, little victories, a new recipe, a finished sketch, a full night of sleep. Each small thing stitched my life back together. I was no longer surviving, I was living. Sometimes when I walked past a hospital, that old ache returned. But instead of pain, it brought perspective. That place wasn't my ending anymore. It was the doorway that led me here, to freedom. One evening, our shelter organized a public event, Voices of Strength. We invited women to share their journeys of recovery. I was asked to give the closing speech. My first instinct was to refuse. The thought of standing on stage terrified me. But then I remembered the woman I used to be, silent, small, scared. And I decided to speak for her. When I stepped onto that stage, the lights were bright, almost blinding. But somewhere in that audience, I imagined all the versions of myself watching. The naive bride, the broken wife, the woman who once believed she was unworthy. I began simply. "I once thought my life ended the day I was betrayed," I said. "But now I know it began there." I spoke about pain, how it strips you down until you meet your truest self. About forgiveness, not as surrender, but as release. And about strength, the quiet kind that grows when no one's watching. When I finished, there was silence, the kind that means hearts are listening. Then came applause, not thunderous, not wild, but warm, honest, human. And in that sound, I found closure. After the event, a young girl approached me. She looked barely 20, her eyes still swollen from recent tears. She said, "Your story gave me hope." I smiled and answered, "It's not just my story. It's yours too. Someday you'll tell it stronger than I did." That night, when I returned home, I lit the same candle I had once placed by the window. Its flame flickered just as it did months ago, but I wasn't the same woman watching it anymore. Pain had sculpted me, not into someone bitter, but into someone brave. I took out my old wedding album one last time. The faces, the smiles, the vows, they no longer hurt. They were simply pages of a book I had already finished reading. I closed it gently and whispered, "Thank you for the lesson." Weeks later, the shelter invited me to lead a new project, a mentorship program for women rebuilding after divorce or loss. I accepted without hesitation. It felt like destiny coming full circle. The same pain that once silenced me was now giving others a voice. I used to think strength was about never falling, but true strength is rising every single time you do. My days became fuller, helping others write resumes, find apartments, rediscover confidence. Each success felt like a quiet victory for all of us who had once been called less than. Sometimes when I passed a mirror, I caught glimpses of who I used to be. But now, instead of sadness, I felt gratitude. Because without her, the broken, fragile version of me, the woman I am today, wouldn't exist. One evening, I received a message from an unknown number. It was him again. He wrote, "I heard about what you're doing. I'm proud of you." For a moment, I just stared at the screen. Then quietly, I deleted the message. No anger, no pain, no nostalgia. Just peace. Because pride wasn't something I needed from him anymore. I had my own. Healing doesn't erase the past. It simply makes it powerless. I stood by the window, watching the city lights flicker. Each light a story. Each story a life rebuilt after darkness. And I realized something. We're all survivors of something. I used to measure my worth by what I could give others. Love, care, devotion. Now I measure it by what I refuse to lose again: my peace, my dignity, my voice. I am no longer the woman who was betrayed. I am the woman who rose. And I want anyone listening to remember this. You don't have to be perfect to be powerful. You just have to decide that your story isn't over yet. Every scar has a story, and every story has a choice: to stay broken or to become art. I chose the latter, and so can you. One day, you'll wake up, look at your reflection, and realize the tears are gone, the ache is quiet, and the woman staring back at you isn't wounded anymore. She's free.